Good afternoon. My name is Marcia Stromgren, and you've tuned in to Just the Facts. I have in the studio today a couple of volunteers from the Lake Superior, Mississippi Railroad. Thank you for coming in, Dave Moore and Joel Mans. Appreciate the fact that you fellows can come in here and tell us a little bit about the volunteer work you do on the railroad. First of all, I would like one of you to please tell us a little bit about the history of the Lake Superior, Mississippi Railroad.
Well, I'll start with that. Please jump in there if you want. The history of the railroad goes back to 1870, and this line we're on was actually a railroad called the Lake Superior in Mississippi, and that was the first line from the Twin Cities into Duluth. Through various iterations over the years, it became part of the Northern Pacific Railway. The Northern Pacific Railway, as time went on, found that the route was too expensive to maintain and adopted what is currently the Munger Trail. They left part of the railroad in place out to New Duluth. At that time, we still had the coolerator plant out there and the paint factory out there. And so that part of the track was kept and maintained. Into the later, I believe it was the 50s, when the coolerator plant burned, the paint plant went out of business, the Northern Pacific had no further interest in the line from Riverside out and abandoned it, and gave it to, well, sold it technically to the city for the creation of a tourist railroad and actually walking path, other access on that. About 1980 is when the current Lake Superior in Mississippi came to be. A group of volunteers from the Lake Superior Museum, Transportation Museum, got together and spent a huge amount of volunteer hours building the track back up, exploring the route, trying to get equipment going, and started the operation. At some point, and I don't recall the time, there was a split around when we started the North Shore Scenic and the Lake Superior in Mississippi, as we are separated from the museum. So we're at this point two separate entities, although with a common history. The railroad, as you know, it's been going on for about 37 years from early 1980, and we've been operating since then with 100% volunteer support.
Well, I have to say that it was the best kept secret until just a few years ago. And I'm not sure if the first time I took that ride, I think it might have been with the charter that the PAC station offered us an opportunity to go on. And then I've been on it a couple of times since then. Another charter, but then one other time. For you viewing audience, if you haven't been on the Lake Superior Mississippi Railroad, I encourage you to take this information and check it out. They'll run through the end of October, is that correct?
About mid-October, depending.
Third week in October.
Third week in October, and it's especially nice during the fall colors. It's beautiful out there. And you see more than the backs of homes. I've been on the other railroad as well. And this is more scenic. You can see wildlife. I've seen bald eagles flying over. I've seen different birds in the estuary there, and just a bit of history is given. It's really a fun ride, especially bringing young people. Brought my granddaughter. She got a chance to go up into the cab, and they told her all about the, I shouldn't say cab, it's the engine, I beg your pardon. Correct me when I'm wrong. But she thought that was a pretty phenomenal experience, and she's just 7 years old, so she really enjoyed it. And I think you would as well, and so would your friends and neighbors. So could you please currently, there's a controversy going on, as I understand, about whether or not you're going to have much of a life in the future. And so I would like you to explain to our viewers where you're at right now. What is your future? Because there is the cleanup of the old steel plant site, and so that is causing you some anxiety over what the future is going to hold. So if you would explain that, I would appreciate that.
Well, there are two separate issues here. The first has been ongoing for some time with the U.S. Steel cleanup, and part of that they would use our right-of-way as a haul road to move the dredge materials to a on-land containment. So they would probably end up taking up part of our line, and we have been lobbying for them to put it back as they found it. We would continue to operate while we were shut down for that period. We would operate up to the cleanup site so people could see what's going on there. The more recent issue, we've been working with the city to find a way to develop the Western Waterfront Trail all the way to Fond du Lac. And we've been part of a number of public meetings with shareholders, interest groups that have pretty much found a route for that trail, and we share the right-of-way we operate on with the trail in many locations. Most recently, the city came to us with a compromise, which I have to say hit us out of the blue, that would shut us off at the eastern end of Mud Lake. And we are not in agreement with this compromise. We don't feel it's much of a compromise because it takes away a very scenic part of our trip. You're out on the causeway, which they would like to remove in the interest of environmental monies for cleanup of Mud Lake. And you're out on the causeway, you have water on both sides, you actually get to view the shoreline as if you're out on Mud Lake. Mud Lake is so named because it's a wide spot in the river that slowed the current, and the river would deposit its sediments in that location. Now in 2013, the MPCA commissioned a study about Mud Lake, and the conclusion of that study basically was we don't know that the causeway really contributes to any of the issues with Mud Lake. So we're unhappy with the direction that the city is taking, and we'd like to retain our trackage per the original agreement all the way to New Duluth. We have submitted a business plan to the city, and a lot of that business plan rounds at the end of the track that we could develop that as a destination. We currently carry kayakers on the train. We stop at Riverside and pick them up, and the marine operator transports their kayaks out to New Duluth where they can board the paddle boats and work their way back down the river. We could expand that. We could do the same thing with bicycles using the Western Waterfront Trail. So we'd like to be there and be a part of the whole process.
Now I'm going to have you define, Dave, a little bit. Mud Lake, causeway. People may not know what you mean by that. Mud Lake, I know where it is. I remember it. But is there a lot of sludge and sediment that has gone over the side of the property from the steel plant down into that lake? So is there any major sediment in Mud Lake from the steel plant, I guess?
I would have to think that there's been some dumping along the shore, but as how much and what sediments went into the lake, I really can't address that.
If I can just, I was reading that 2013 study that they're referring to, and they did a number of samplings within the Mud Lake area. And there were a few spots that rose above what would be a normal level of certain contaminants, but only a few spots. I mean, there was nothing. I guess there's sort of levels where the environmental people become concerned, and there's another level where, wow, we've got a problem. From what I could see, we have a few spots in there that kind of, okay, we should look at this. I saw no evidence of anything going to the, gee, we've got a problem level on that.
And basically the study said that we need to know a lot more about it before we make any determinations.
Precisely why I'm getting a little bit more specific on this area. Sometimes I think we react before we have all the facts. And I think that's where I would emphasize the need to focus their attention on before they start tearing up something that maybe they won't replace it. But the causeway is the train track that goes over from one piece of land to another, because there's the water that comes underneath that causeway or the train track for people, right? Is that what I understand?
That's correct.
Okay. Why would that have to be taken out?
Well, that's a good question. I think they portray it as it has to come out so you could clean up all of Mud Lake, but nope.
may not need to clean up all of Mud Lake.
No, exactly.
Is my point.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the study even went so far as to suggest that the causeway might be beneficial if you wanted to plant wild rice in the contained area. The causeway might actually protect that rice from the tidal surges up the river.
There's also some discussion that having the causeway prevents water from washing the entire Mud Lake from the rest of the St. Louis River. But our position has been there are ways to increase that. We can put additional culverts, we can make additional openings, bridges to allow that water to flow. And there is no definitive answer that we have seen of, well, how much do we really need? I mean, do we really need to tear it all out to get it or not? There's a great many unanswered questions.
Okay. I have watched many of PBS programming. I find that's the best channel to spend my time on. And there have been some fascinating railroad documentaries. People love that kind of thing. Your train offers a very authentic, from that era type of atmosphere. And perhaps with more PR, you're going to have more people coming. But it seems to me we're saving old buildings, and sometimes we don't even want to tear up the cobblestone streets that have lasted longer than the bricks that are down on Superior Street. But this is a part of history of this area that people can experience. Is there any organization nationally that could support your cause with attorneys and whatnot? Because with the volunteer organization, you're spending your money on the maintenance of those pieces of equipment, any reverberation that needs to be done, and I don't know what other, the cost of fuel and so forth. So if you had some support from some organization that's national to fight this cause for you, do you think that that would be a beneficial thing to look into? And perhaps?
Absolutely, and we're contemplating it. In fact, we were just having a discussion recently. The Northern Pacific Railway Historical Society is holding their annual convention in Duluth in September. And as I mentioned, the railroad, the line we're on, was originally part of the Northern Pacific. So we're discussing how to reach out to them and at least make some contacts, and maybe there's some resources available to us on that alone. I mean, they're a perfect potential partner for us. And I think there's a lot of other rail preservation organizations that we just need to get more aggressive in seeking assistance from them.
Yeah, I would say that that's a very good way to try and get more members to back you, because, well, I know my life is very busy, and I'm sure that everybody else has a lot of different things in their lives, and you may not be able to if you don't have somebody that can focus on that specifically, you'd be missing maybe perhaps a great partner that could assist you, especially if you need attorneys to get in there and do some pinch hitting for you. So I wonder what else you would like to tell us. Now, I know when we were there, we did have a narrative of the area, and unfortunately I couldn't hear it because I was busy filming my back camera. But one of the things that is really neat that you don't have anywhere else is you have this open car at the back, So on a nice day, people can be outside and see, instead of just looking through a window, they can see all around them. And I saw a bald eagle the one time we were there. Just tell us a little bit about the makeup of the railroad. What kind of an engine is it that pulls it, and what kind of cars you have, and how many passengers you can accommodate? And
Well, we run on not the original rail, but the rail that was relayed. Our oldest rail is from 1891. It weighs 67 pounds per yard, so it's fairly light in terms of today's standards. And that works well with our equipment. The engine that we use, the locomotive, is a 1946 switch engine that came from a grain mill in Wisconsin. And our coaches are both built in 1912. They came from the Duluth-Mesabi and Iron Range Railway. When the railroad ceased passenger service, those cars were relegated into work train service and used as bunk cars and such for gangs working on the Iron Range. And eventually the Mesabi did away with the bunk cars, and the cars were given to the Lake Superior, Mississippi, who refurbished them and put seats back in them. And now there are coaches. The safari car was built a little bit later, I believe in the 1920s. It was just a flat car, and then the railroad added the benches and the sides on it so people could experience it outdoors.
okay.
We can accommodate about 200 people
Oh,
on the train.
okay. I guess I've had wonderful low turnout rides, which makes it real easy to maneuver around,
Yes.
especially when you're trying to film something. So
Yeah, starting about mid-September, for that last month or so of operations, we've tended to have far more people riding on it.
Oh, okay. So what then are the when do you start doing the trips? And again, I know you said the third week in October. So when do you start taking on passengers for a tour?
I mean, in terms of months?
Right.
Yeah, normally mid-June. We delayed a little bit this year. We had some additional track work to do. We had an inspection in the spring from the Federal Railway Administration and Minnesota Department of Transportation. Found some areas we needed to do a little more work on, and we took care of that prior to starting operations. So we were the latter part of June this year. And then normally we run every weekend, two runs on Saturday, 2 on Sunday. When we get to the last month of operation, last year we added a third run for most of those days.
And what are the times for those runs on the weekend now?
10:30 and 1:30.
10:30 and
And
1:30.
when we've run the third one, I believe it's gone on at 4
Okay.
o'clock.
10:30 and 1:30. 10:30 and 1:30. Just make sure you remember that. I might be taking 2 granddaughters who are from the cities. They're coming up, pick them up on Saturday. So I wanted to be sure I had the times right. So we missed you last year. We went out there, and I found out, we don't run during the weekend. So we couldn't get there on the weekend because they had to go home. So hopefully they'll get a chance to do it this time, and I hope the weather's decent for it. Thinking on something you just said about maintenance of the track, you're obviously regulated. So people who have been with the railroad for many years, are many of them former employees of a railroad, that they have the knowledge that you need to do all these different aspects of what you are doing?
We're really fortunate that we have a great mix of people, and a number of them do have prior rail experience. Others just come to us and find their spot. There's many different jobs. Joel and I are both trained as conductors. We have firemen, engineers, we have people in the ticket office, we have car hosts that help the narrators explain sights along the way and sell refreshments. And we have some people that enjoy working on the equipment. They're more mechanically inclined, and others that like to go out and work on the track. So we're happy to have them all.
I don't want to pinpoint age, but are we talking mostly 50 and above, or do you have some young people in the mix too?
Well, we have a number of young people. There certainly won't deny we have some older folks, obviously looking at who's sitting here. But we have a number of folks who are, they're still working. We have, our youngest person working on us I think is 15 years old. He's working as a car host with us, and we go everywhere in between those ages. We have a very diverse group of age groups and experience working on the railroad.
Well, that's good to hear, because you want longevity if you're able to continue with this. So you're going to want new young people coming up into this. Are many of those people railroad buffs that were part of the railroad? The museum, the railroad museum in the past, then? Were they railroad buffs originally, most of them, or?
Some of our members came from that, the older group. I think everybody a lot of people have some love of railroading who are in there, but not necessarily. My wife works with us on the train as a car host, and she really had no interest in trains, but she likes what we're doing and what we're doing for the city, and so that's her part of the enjoyment, not necessarily because it's a train.
And supporting you.
Well, that goes without saying.
Well, some.
Yes.
Some people
Yes.
don't support what their spouses are doing, and so.
Yeah, I think all the volunteers have some interest in trains.
Okay. Well, my husband has, and I don't know, it might be Lino. It's all in a nice little box up in the closet that kids used to play with it. We used to put it out once a year, Christmas time, and it took a pretty big area. But he played with that thing growing up all of his life, and so unfortunately, don't even have time to get it out for the grandkids. They're there so a little short period of time. But we don't have any young boys in our family. It's all girls. So
Girls are welcome.
yes, well, it would be nice if they were there long enough so they could enjoy it. But it's such a fast world today compared to when I was
Yes.
growing up. We had a little train. I know my brother had a train when I was growing up as well. And so, yeah, if I were able to go to Europe and do a tour, I would want to do a train tour, because the fascination of the train is something I've enjoyed since I was a little kid. All my, maybe Naomi, I have to find out from her, but my older two sons, one is 49 and the other one is 43, both have ridden trains out to the West Coast. And that was quite an experience for them. And going through the Rocky Mountains, sleeping overnight in the berth, I think that's what you call it. That was quite a trip. So yeah, we've been on the train. They've been on the trains since they were very young. What are some of the other things that you would like to share with the viewers about what is happening with the possible future of the railroad? Have we covered everything now that you think is important?
Well, I think certainly the city and the tracks are our primary issue. And, we alluded to volunteers. That is one of the issues, much like every service organization in the United States these days. Getting new volunteers is a bit of a challenge. It's been especially hard for us because with this cleanup of the U.S. Steel, initially we were going to be out of service starting in 2015, then it was 2016, then it was 2017. We think we're out of business in 2018, but the problem has been in terms of training. We are trained, as conductors, we're federally certified conductors. We go through the same training as a Burlington Northern Santa Fe conductor would. Obviously different routes, issues in that, but we all have to be certified. And for people to go through the training and the certification when, we're going to be down or limited operations for the next 2 years, I don't want to make the commitment. Well, you keep adding that on, and that has been a challenge for us.
So you need some kind of security, some kind of knowledge of your future. That's a crucial point we need to make clear.
You have the same issue in the maintenance of the property too. If you're going to be running, you need to do the maintenance as if you're going to be here. If you're not going to be here, then you do your maintenance differently. And We currently are replacing enough ties on an annual basis to keep up. This year we began ordering new ties to put in to extend the life of the track. We do inspect our bridges on an annual basis. That's required by the Federal Railroad Administration, and we have a local engineering firm do that, and they rate them for the adequacy of our operation. We inspect the track on a regular basis before we operate every weekend. And we maintain the track, I should also say, to Federal Railroad Administration Class 1 standards. And when the inspectors came out this year, that's what they were rating us against. They found no violations, and whatever defects they did find, we corrected before we operated.
That's important to have that type of overview, simply because people's lives are at stake, and you could have a potential lawsuit on your hands if you have a derailment because you weren't responsible in keeping up your track.
There's nothing. We've been called hobbyists, and there's nothing hobby about it when you're carrying passengers.
No. Well, call it what they like, but the reality is you are regulated.
Yes, we are.
There's no two ways about that. I don't think today anything can be done when it involves public safety. I don't think it cannot be regulated. I think that's absolutely crucial.
And we take safety very seriously, both for our volunteers and the passengers, and we don't shortcut anything.
Every morning when the crew is assembling the train and bringing it up to the ticket office, we have a safety meeting, and we talk about issues that are out there. We talk about what the operations might be and what to look for, and be careful about going in between the cars and all these different topics, because we don't want to see anyone get hurt.
Well, I can tell you, when I was filming and I got out of the train when the locomotive was taken from the front of the train, and that's out there at the Boy Scout landing. It was taken from the front of the train and brought to the back of the train. I was very well instructed where I could stand, what was happening with that train. It was, I cannot remember the fellow's name, but your train master, is that what she was called? What's
Probably would have been the conductor.
She was the chief, was a woman, and she was the chief person in charge of the reconnecting and the disconnecting.
Probably the conductor.
Okay, the conductor. Okay. She was busy with her job, so she couldn't be distracted with me and my camera, so this other fellow was with me, and he was giving all of the steps along the way with what was going to happen as I was there filming. Of course, I had to stand at a certain place so I wouldn't be in her way and not get too close to the train backing up. And it was all very well, carefully done. It was kind of interesting to watch it, and hopefully I haven't produced the program yet, but hopefully I did a good job. It's a little hard to carry a camera and film at the same time.
Yes.
You got to watch where you're standing, and you want to get it steady, because you don't want people looking at something that's jumping up and down. So yeah, it was quite an experience. That was never offered when I was on the other railroad. There was no opportunity to get out and talk to the people that were there, other than to say hello to you, and as you got on board, they helped you up and helped you back down again. It was very non-personal.
They have a nice operation.
Oh, they do.
I wouldn't take away from them in a bit. I think that they portray a different era of rail travel, more towards the end of the passenger rail era. But they have a fine operation, and they have fine trackage and a lot of resources. I think we bring you closer to more things. We bring you closer to the river, closer to nature, and even closer to the crew and the narrators, and we make it a little more personal experience.
Yeah, that's exactly what I've noticed. I mean, they have a very fine trip up to Two Harbors. We spent some time up there when John's mother was alive and the granddaughters. And that was a fun day to go all the way up there and spend time in Two Harbors and look at the train depot there and look at some of that stuff. But yeah, it's definitely a different ride, and like you say, and I have to agree, it was much more personal, and I appreciated that very much. Like I said, when they saw my granddaughter, we were there early filming, and they just, would you like to come up into the locomotive? And of course, she was more than happy and excited to do that. And then the conductors also passed around the hat, so the kids could have hats on and get pictures taken with the conductor hats on. And that was another exciting thing for the kids to be doing. So, yeah, we had I think we had pizza brought in for our charter. They picked that up at the Boy Scout landing. I did have a thought when we were talking earlier. So you only go to the Boy Scout landing, but there's a potential, did you say, of going on into Fond du Lac?
No, what we're saying is developing that end of,
right.
So developing it into maybe some picnic grounds or something that the people would say to go off on the 10:30 train, get off at the end, spend 3-4 hours enjoying the river from that standpoint, having a picnic ground, some other activities. And that actually was part of the stakeholders meetings we had with the city and it was LHB. And that was discussed a lot. We could develop that. The city could develop that for some recreation. We could be part of that, have a station out there.
You could have a pavilion for folks. You could have, impromptu concerts, somebody playing music. All kinds of different things could go on out there. They could spend the time fishing until the second train came out to pick them up. So we'd like to develop that and not lose it.
And that would be, kind of give us a location. You would be still stopping at the Boy Scout landing then?
At Boy Scout Landing,
Okay.
which is New Duluth.
When the train came into Duluth originally, where were those tracks from the Boy Scout landing west? Can you...
They go through Jay Cook Park, and actually one of our car hosts met a fellow who had some background history of Jay Cook and took a number of folks for a walk. And buried in Jay Cook Park, there's still some the bridge abutments from trestles, other architectural, I hate to say leftovers, I can't think of the better, but showing where structures where the train went back in through there and ultimately into Carleton.
So then, if I can try to pinpoint this a little bit more, Boy Scout Landing, most people, well, many people, I shouldn't say most people, many people know where that's at. From that point, there's no evidence, or there is some still evidence, or you just only know that there's some still in Jay Cook Park?
The roadbed is still there, and the Western Waterfront Trail would use that former rail bed to reach Fond du Lac.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And that would be as far as the Western Waterfront Trail would go.
Okay. I'm familiar with Fond du Lac. My aunt and uncle lived there, so I was there as a child quite a bit. But I think I know where that would come in there. It would have to cross the highway, would it not? I mean, it can't go along the edge of the land there.
The routing we've seen from the city is it would kind of skirt, and at some point potentially some crossing of Highway 23. And they're not really sure how all those pieces would fit together. I mean, they're on that sort of a conceptual
I know where the
development
former
there.
train station, which has been turned into housing, that building still stands out there, as I recall.
Okay, I'm
I
not
don't
familiar
know,
with
maybe
that
it had
particular.
burned down. Rachel Martin, a historian, she lives in Superior, has done many different tours throughout the city, and I've been on many of her tours, which lovely history of our area that I didn't know growing up anything about. So we were out there and looked at that time. So, okay, can you give me any idea of the names of those who are partnering with you right now? Did we mention those at the beginning? Or
Right now, basically, we're partnering with the Riverside Marina on the what we call the choo-choo paddle. And they're the ones, I don't know if you meant on a business standpoint.
well, even with support for what you're doing also?
I don't know that we've actually
We don't
tied
have,
in with
we don't
any
have
other-
any partners with us yet. We need to acquire those. We do partner with the zoo, I believe, on a discount on tickets back and forth.
Okay.
We've talked about partnering with Spirit Mountain.
I think you've kind of hit. If we have any weakness, we have a lot of hands-on, do-it people. We need to look further into the background grant writers and people to reach out to other communities and organizations and tie us with them. I know I visited a railroad in Ohio, and on the side of one of the passenger cars was this car adopted by Home Depot, and they maintained that car for that particular tourist railroad. So there's a variety of options that we need to be more aggressive at seeking out. And I'm not trying to point at Home Depot. But that was
right. I understand you're using it as an example. Those sounds like some terrific potentially.
Yes.
We have to look for those sources of funding and help. We don't want to be a burden on the city.
Right.
We do receive currently $20,000 in tourism tax funding, and we only received funding from the city since 2012, when the flood occurred out there and took out the bridge and basically our operations for a while. So since that time, we've received some funding from the city, but other venues in the city do receive that, and certainly much more than we do.
Well, and that's what the tourism tax dollars was supposed to be for.
That's correct.
And so I'm glad to hear that you're receiving some support there in that respect. Every bit helps, especially.
And we use that basically for track maintenance.
Can you give me an idea of approximately your financial outlook on a year-to-year basis? How much are you spending on maintenance? Because we know that you don't have to pay, well, of course you have to pay insurance and fuel. But
insurance is a big part of our budget. We have to have railroad protective insurance and liability insurance to cover our operation over the Burlington Northern. We spent this year so far a little over $30,000 on track maintenance. And fuel is an expense. I don't know how much that is.
I'm not familiar with the others. I mean, literally, basically, the track maintenance and insurance are our most significant expenses.
We're carrying about 6,000 passengers a year, and our trip is 6 miles out and 6 miles back. So we cover 12 miles. So that's 72,000 passenger miles along that river and estuary.
that's amazing. I would never have thought that, but it gets down in the nitty-gritty. So on an average year, just ballpark it if you would, what is the expected cost? How, do you put in approximately $30,000 in maintenance each year on the track, or can that vary with an inspection and what they say needs to be done?
I think that that obviously can vary with what you're doing, but I think that's a realistic expectation going forward. I can't speak too far in the past. This is only my second year with the railroad.
Oh, okay.
But we are doing what we need to keep the track up. We spend money each year, as I said, on bridge inspections, which are required. We maintain those records.
How many bridges are there, Dave?
We had 5 bridges. One was filled in and replaced with a set of culverts, and that's right in the middle of the U.S. Steel cleanup. So I don't know what will happen to that when they're all done. But our other bridges are in good shape for our equipment.
5. I never would have thought that, writing it. So, okay, neither one of you have any kind of a financial ballpark idea of cost.
No, I mean, the insurance is in the $40,000-$50,000 range. And I mean, Dave hit on the maintenance, and depends. A lot of the maintenance expense is partially what happens during the winter. The winter can be
floods.
Or floods, or it depends what Lake Superior or the St. Louis River does. So there's a certain amount of just routine what we would call preventive maintenance, and then there's repairs. And
So is there very much washing away of the track area where you're right on the...
We do
Is
get
that
some
Spirit
wave
Lake
action.
that you're on the right-hand side? That's Spirit Lake, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, I mean left-hand side.
There is some wave action, and periodically we do go out there with small amounts of riprap or larger stone that we place to protect the embankment.
What was the amount of damage during the 2012 flood?
Well, there was a stretch of track, as I understand, that was washed out near Riverside. It washed out the Burlington Northern and then across our trackage, which is right next to them at that location. So that had to be repaired. And then the biggest item was the Burlington Northern's bridge by the zoo was destroyed. So they had to replace that. So that literally shut us down for that period of time.
And there was the uncertainty, of course, well, is the Burlington Northern going to replace it? They're serving one customer in Riverside, that's Tate and Lyle. We expected they would, but I suspect there was some thoughts in the BN's boardrooms of, well, do we make enough money to offset a bridge? But fortunately, they did decide to rebuild that and allowed us to
Bet you were
continue.
sitting with bated breath on that one, perhaps.
Well, we were very happy when they started digging at the bridge.
Yeah. Well, I think we've covered quite a bit. Is there anything else that you would like to, I want to go over the times again at the very end. Anything else that you would like to add that has come to your mind while we're talking here?
Well, we're located right along Grand Avenue. We're right across from the zoo. So we're easy access, and we'd certainly love to have people come out and ride us.
Wonderful parking. It's easy parking right there by the train and just step up into the train.
Yeah. I think our hardest thing is getting the word out that we are not the train leaving from the depot. We have encountered many people coming from out of town. Well, I came to ride you and I parked downtown and I went to the depot and I found out that's not the, and then they try to get back to meet us. And publicity is one of our harder challenges, is getting, we get a lot of people from even the city of Duluth. I've lived here all my life and I didn't know you were here.
Well, like I said earlier, you were the best kept secret until all of a sudden I was made aware of the fact that you do run this train, and I was excited because, well,
we're glad you were, and we see other people getting off the train, and the only unhappy rider I ever saw was a little boy about 2 years old that was unhappy about everything. The other passengers get off with smiles, and they let us know that they enjoyed the ride.
One of my best moments as conductor was a few weeks ago. I had talked to a little girl on the train, and when she got off the train, she came up and gave me the biggest hug you can imagine. I thought, wow, this is really great.
You must have reminded her of her grandfather or something like that.
Probably somebody younger, but
well, nothing wrong with being a grand person. We've lived our lives of sowing oats and all that. Now we have a little bit more experience behind us that is beneficial in some ways. Well, it's been fun having you in here, talking to you and getting to know a little bit more about the railroad. I don't always remember a lot of things until I hear it and hear it and hear it. But it's good to hear about another attraction, and especially out in the western section of the country from where I came from. Like it's Piedmont Heights is where I grew up. And, Denfeld, went to Denfeld and I was out in that area quite a bit as a young person. And so good to have a nice attraction out there. And I hope others will come out and experience it and have a wonderful day. Like I've had 3 times, I've had good weather with my rides. And so hopefully others will come out and enjoy what I've experienced. And hopefully we can keep this railroad running. The times on the weekend, again, are
10:30 and 12:30 Saturday and Sunday. Or excuse me, yes, 10:30 and 1:30 Saturday and Sunday.
Saturdays and Sundays.
And later in the fall, we may add a 4 o'clock, but people should confirm that before.
And if you want to do a charter, this is an excellent way to have an office get-together, a reunion, or 70th birthday, like mine's coming up here. You know, there's lots of good ways to use the train, and you just have to call in advance. Let's have some contact information where people can get in touch with you.
There is the phone number, and I don't know that.
I do.
We do have a web page.
I don't think it's on here, though. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. I thought it might be on here.
Just a second.
Dave, are you bringing that up for us?
I'm trying to.
Okay, I just don't want to have a...
We're on Facebook.
Our ticket office number is 218-624-7549.
Okay, and is that phone answered at all times then?
It's answered on the weekends. We have people on there all the time while we're operating. And other times, I believe it goes to an answering machine and somebody will return your call.
Okay, would you repeat that phone number one more time?
218-624-7549.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Glad that you could come in and visit, and we'll get this out for you right away, and it'll also go on YouTube, so
Great.
Great.
it'll be
Thank you for having us.
Yes, we appreciate
Glad
the
to have
opportunity to
have you in here.
talk about our railroad.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.